Commissioners, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our first budget meeting as we prepare to move into fiscal year 2027. We're gonna have this workshop style meeting. We're gonna suspend Robert's rules. This will mainly be a presentation style meeting, mostly dictated by staff, but we'll begin with roll call. Madam Clerk.
Commissioner Maxim,
Here.
Commissioner Nero. Commissioner Mellon McGovern.
Here.
Commissioner Vo.
Here.
Mayor Hoskins.
Here. All right, we're at fiscal year budget 2027 discussion. Administrator Lippman.
Great. I just want to let everybody know Commissioner Nero did call me. He's on his way. He will join us as soon as he gets here. And lastly, for anybody in the audience, public comment will be held after the discussion. If you would like to make public comment, there are public comment sheets out behind the door. You can fill one out, and if you could get them to Deputy Clerk Roach before the end of the discussion, we'll get them to Clerk Taylor to address you when it's time for public comment there. First of all, I just want to thank everybody, commissioners, staff, for joining us today. Oh, here we are, Commissioner Nero. Today's meeting is the first of our discussions related to fiscal year 27. We're going to start off with a brief recap of fiscal year 26 so that we have a base as to what we're starting with. I want to thank Director Olmstead for all the work that she's put in to this budget presentation today, particularly with everything related to the year-end projections for fiscal year 26. And so we're going to just do kind of some information sharing to start off with, and then we'll get into the discussions and any questions that you have regarding fiscal year 27 at the end of the slideshow presentation.
So 2026 is projecting for revenues to end pretty much in line with budget. We still have 2 months of revenues to collect and record from the state for their tax disbursements, and we keep the expenses open through the end of June for any incoming liability, any incoming commitments for fiscal year 2026. So with that being said, these are projections because we still have all of May and all of June to review revenue and expenditures. The revenues were budgeted with less than 1% increase from 2025 year ends, and they are short of that, but meet 99% of the budgeted expenditure, our budget expectations. Everything was close to in line with the expectations. We had delays with the county property tax, and I'm still trying to confirm some of the final numbers from disbursements for the funds that went to the police and fire pension funds. We record that as a revenue in the general fund, and then we record that as an expenditure under the village clerk's office. So I'm finalizing some deposits that were made that we, as the village, did not receive record of. And so that's why those probably might end a little higher as far as revenue and expense, but that's the information I had to work with at that time. For expenditures, we budgeted a 12% increase. Year end is looking to be about a 3% increase, meeting 92% of budgeted expenditures. The biggest expenditure, as has been the same for several years, is wages and benefits. Wages and benefits were budgeted a little over, it's basically 2.8 million for full staffing and potential retirements, and expenditures met 91% of that. Positions remained unfilled. So there's overtime, there's comp time that applies to the collective bargaining units. There's exempt staff taking on additional work. So it's a savings, but in my opinion, it's a savings in monetary only. It's putting additional strain on everybody. We have overages and overtime in certain departments, and Again, there's comp time that gets paid out, at a higher rate of pay at a later date for the bargaining units that are eligible for that. Operating expenditures remained under budget by 2% from expectation. Those are, the basic day-to-day operations for electricity, telephone, training, equipment. We had some overages in specific line items such as what we paid the state of Illinois for their share of the GEMT program. Our consolidated dispatch had some increased expenditures that were not budgeted for. And then some traffic and street light maintenance, which is sometimes covered under insurance claims. Sometimes it's just the cost that the village is exposed to. And then we had grants at 73% of budget expectation. A lot of grants roll over into next fiscal year. We budget for grants that we may or may not receive. And, what we do receive is sometimes not what was budgeted for. So we assess it as they come and see if it makes sense to accept the grant and what our match will be. So our revenues at 23 million, our expenditures at 27 million. We're showing a deficit before the transfer in of, let's see, that is about 3.7 million. And then we transfer in other financing sources from the water fund, the VIP fund, and the motor fuel tax fund, which are all eligible and budgeted operating transfers in. So the net end of 2026 is a 2.2 projected deficit, which will take the ending fund balance of the general fund into a deficit, which we have managed to not have a deficit for at least about the past 4 or 5 years.
And then do we have to pay back the 1.5 million that we transfer in from the other fund?
No, those
No.
are operating transfers that are budgeted. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Water fund is, this is a pretty healthy fund. I do want to reiterate that the fund balance that shows on these sheets, that is not cash. That is capital investments. So when you see a beginning and ending fund balance of 33 million, that is not cash on hand. That includes assets that are not spendable, such as infrastructure, the water towers, the water, the projects that we do. So the revenues met about 78% of budget and expenditures about 56% of budget. The timing with everything with the Illinois EPA and that project that has delayed some of the revenue that was forecast for this year. But at the same time, we didn't do a lot of the projects that had been included in the budget. The audit at the end of the year reassesses everything that we do. So the capital expenditures, the cash that goes out gets recorded as an asset gain. So you'll see that they reduce the prior year expenses to record the gain in assets. So when you look at 2025, that ending balance of 7, the water expenditure of 3.9 million, basically, that takes into account the funds that the auditors have reclassed. And I think I have that included. I want to say in 2025, the actual expenditures was recorded to capital asset was about 7.5 million. So we did a lot of work in 2025. And then the other funds, not a lot of activity in the TIP funds or the VIP funds. Again, we had some budgets, expenditures for capital improvement projects that we did not see in the VIP fund, or preliminary expenses only. TIP funds, there's 2026 will be the end of the Brown Street as far as reporting goes, and no remaining balance. We did transfer funds from the Roosevelt Canna to the Roosevelt Road as that TIP was terminated. So as allowable by law, we were able to port those funds into the existing Roosevelt Road. I know will be discussion later about some potential projects that are hopefully coming down the pipeline. And then, I think I listed in here, or Rachel will go over some of the purchases that were made from the fleet fund and from the ARPA fund, from the grant fund. And then we expired debt in 2026 The bond for the VIP fund was paid off. The vehicles that were in the general fund were paid off. Currently, the only debt we have is for a car that purchased through the police vehicle replacement fund, and that ends in January 2027. So it does not account for the loan that we know that we have coming for the engine. Okay. So when it comes to the property tax, anywhere from varying, years, it's been 80%. We did allocate a little bit more to general fund in fiscal 2026. So of the property tax, at least 74% goes to police and fire, IMRF, and Social Security. The biggest portion goes to police and fire pension funds. We are not meeting the statutorily required contribution. We are coming closer each year to the actuarially determined contribution, but not quite, at a funding level that we need to be. We are making, the best efforts in getting as close as we can, but the pension payments in 2020, according to the audit, were 58% of the, what's called the ADC, actuarially determined contribution. Funding ratio, depending on what audit report you review, is anywhere from, I believe, 38 to 42%. Fire pension, 67% of the actuarially determined contribution, 39 to 41%, I believe, is the range, depending on what audit actuarial report you're reviewing. IMRF, we had no choice but to pay 100% of the determined contribution. The funding ratio is 100%. Again, that's a 4.5% employee contribution. The employer contribution ranges annually depending on IMRF's return. I think they're a year in or so in arrears. And then this is just from the audit showing that the increases, this is IMRF, showing this is IMRF, yes. Showing, what the determined contribution has been, that we've met the contribution, what the payroll costs associated with this are. You'll see in 2023, 2024, we report with the library. So the library pays their portion. That's why you see the separation for 2025. That's the village share, that's the library share. So we are consistent in compliance with IMRF. Police pension fund, again, you can see contributions in relation to the determined contribution. Efforts are happening to get us closer to where we need to be for both police and for fire. On the next page, you'll see that increase in the percentage of covered payroll, but still below the statutorily required minimum contribution. So by 2040, the funds are to be 90% funded, and the our audit and our actuary always gives us 100% funding. Going off the consolidated funds is for 90% funding. So that's a wide range of different variables that might be used depending on the actuary for the assumptions that they make for return on investments, mortality, risk involved, and that's why you're never going to have a consistent number.
One of the things I wanted to just point out here is that IML, the Illinois Municipal League, is advocating for some changes. They would like to see the specified funding ratio that we have to meet right now in 2040 pushed to 2050. We're certainly not the only municipality in this situation. So I know that doesn't necessarily make things better, but we are definitely not alone in this. Some of the reasons why we are in the position that we are in is just historically looking back. The village underfunded public safety pensions for many, many years. So the large legacy deficit that we have there's been a snowball effect year after year. And so, certainly the last 5 years, we've made efforts to put additional payments to both the police and fire pensions. As Director Olmsted pointed out, we're getting closer to where we need to be, but certainly worthy of discussion as to how we keep going.
Because I want to mention this deficit is directly related to the additional contributions, if not 100%, but there's a correlation between the extra money that we're putting into the police and fire pension funds as opposed to maintaining its village revenue. So that's, that it's it's hard to determine which is the more essential need. They're all essential.
I think we determined we put about $5 million into
Mhm.
both the police and fire combined this year. So,
Mhm.
while we need to make those contributions to the pensions, that is $5 million from the general fund that is not used on other.
And I think I wrote down, it's about 18% of the general fund expenditures for current year.
Larry went over that for us. Fiscal year 26 projects, we are completed and are still in some major projects. Water meter replacement project, we are finishing off. That should be completed this summer. I think we have 30 more water meters, I think is what I saw in the email this morning that we still need to change out. Lead service line replacement project number 2 was completed. We also did a lead service line inventory. The water reservoir feasibility study we conducted. Green Alley project number 2. We did our 2025 sidewalk replacement project. We had the Dixon Street brick repair. That was something that we'd been keeping our eye on and kind of came to a head this year. And so we had to make sure that we did that. And then we also had the emergency repairs to the community center and the Jackson Boulevard pump station that we had to do. These projects, however, were not funded out of the general fund. These were funded out of our special funds, whether it was water, BIP, and MFT. Some of the other things that we did throughout town, we updated signage. If you drive around, we put in new directional signs on the major thoroughfares so that people could see where, our restaurants, where parking was, where the downtown, where Village Hall was. We got a grant last year we added a butterfly garden across the street from Village Hall. We continued with our tree canopy work, and once again, we were designated Tree City USA. We completed the Madison Street revitalization project, the bike racks, the benches, the groundings for the trees. We purchased new body-worn cameras for the police department. We upgraded several much-needed public work vehicles. We got the self-contained breathing apparatus equipment for the fire department. We finally took delivery of our ambulance. I think we're 5 years.
I think so.
5 years waiting for that. We completed the building code updates. We went to Springfield and helped advocate for transit bill legislation, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. And then we were also a co-recipient of the Illinois Association of Park Districts and intergovernmental award with the Park District of Forest Park. I'm just going to touch real fast on these were some of the priorities that we had talked about at the end of the budget meeting last year. And so I'm just going to go through these real quick. We did start I'm going to kind of talk about the parking amnesty collection program first. We did offer about a 2.5-month amnesty. People could come in and pay their parking tickets without the fees that had accrued. And back in end of January 2026, Chief Gross had reported that they had collected about $25,000 in payments. So there was a portion that did come back to the village on that. The boot program, we waited until after the holidays to put in place. There's still about $2 million in uncollected parking fines. We're not really comfortable predicting what we'll collect from that, but I know that we have started putting the boot on just a number of cars, and I know almost immediately we had people come into the station wanting to take care of that. So that will continue. Leaf pickup, last year we held a town hall, and we listened to residents who came in and had varying opinions on leaf pickup. And so what we decided to do was this year we're going to continue with the street sweeping that we need to do that anyways because we need to keep our sewers clean. But we are going to work to encourage people that can to either mulch their leaves. Again, our garbage contract allows for unlimited bags and leaf pickup. And so for those who can, bag. We are encouraging people to do that. And you know, you can leave them on the lawn, you can mulch, and we're gonna kind of monitor for right now to see if those efforts can reduce the number of leaves and the amount of leaves that we have to dispose of in the fall. On-street parking, still in progress. We're working with the Traffic and Safety Commission. Commissioner Mellon Rogovin and I have had several conversations trying to find a solution to the parking needs in Forest Park for residents, but also taking into account the safety concerns that many residents also have when they drive into communities that have streets lined with cars. We also need to take into account, you know, our public safety vehicles' ability to get down our streets.
But that's not gonna be much of a revenue generator.
Correct. Crossing guards, we are officially transferring the responsibility of the crossing guard program to District 91 effective June 30th. Until then, we have been splitting the costs with District 91. They are going to take over the program completely, including funding and maintaining the program. Property tax legislation that we talked about, we did find out that we were unable to move forward with that. Flood grants remain paused. The water meter replacement project, as I spoke earlier, we're coming up on finishing that. The goal of the water meter replacement project was to, we're hoping to see money saved because we're capturing more accurate reads. And so we're hoping that we won't see as much water loss. And so that would be for our payments that the village makes, but also for our residents. The program has already allowed us to catch leaks that residents have had. We have a program which residents can log into, create an account, and they can get notifications of when their water flow goes up, increases. If they can set alerts. So if they have a leaky toilet or if pipe breaks, they can have notifications sent to them as well. Fee increases, vehicle stickers. We put those increases in place. We approved them in fiscal year 26. We are now seeing them in fiscal year 27. We're also continuing to we've been auditing, particularly through the water meter replacement project, just to make sure that consumers are being charged the appropriate fees that they're supposed to be.
So do we have a number on sort of what our overall additional revenue or savings are, since, you know, these were our priorities last year? How did we do?
So just in the things like, let's see, probably only in don't have anything for the water because the project is still kind of ongoing, so we haven't finalized any review of that. Under licenses and permits, so the business licenses that hadn't been increased since 1990 for the early 2000s, that was recognized in fiscal 2026. And that was about a 15% increase over the prior year. So over 2025 revenues. The vehicle license fees, the last rate adjustment had been in 2020 and 2017. And so I don't have a defined numbers as far as what Rachel has laid out, what we've seen increase. You know, we have seen parking fines increase, that revenue. Let's see. So what we take in-house, what's considered traffic fines, you know, we had that budgeted at 365,000. In comparison with the prior year ends, what we recorded was a little over 415,000. The debt recovery had been budgeted at 115,000, and the Illinois Debt Recovery Program that came in at about 150,000. Some of the red speed enforcement and collection agencies, this is just the revenue. It does not reflect the expenditures, which are reported under the village clerk. So when you look at these numbers of 344,000 for red speed enforcement and 131,000 for collection agency, the agencies maintain about 50 to 60% of that revenue.
I guess what I was hoping for, and I had asked ahead of time, is could we kind of like come up with a rough number of how we ended up, we did these things, with the getting rid of the crossing guards, getting rid of the flood grants for now, just kind of like an analysis of how we did since last
Follow up
year's
with that.
priorities. Okay, that would be awesome. Thank you.
Okay, so moving into our current fiscal year. Just kind of a review of how this year's budget process will go. Staff is submitting their draft budgets right now. Director Olmsted and I will review them, kind of go through, we ask a lot of questions, figure out where, what's necessary, what's not. We'll go back to staff for input. And then what we're looking for from, this meeting and potentially the next meeting is direction from the council on certain policy and priorities that we want to, that you want us to focus on while we are making the revisions to the budget. We'll need another budget meeting to discuss. That'll be the budget meeting in which we'll have all the draft budgets from the departments laid out to everybody here, so that you guys can also weigh in on those. We'll do our final changes, and then as we've typically done, our appropriations ordinance comes up to the council for approval to be adopted. That would be, we have to do it by the July 27th meeting. Okay, looking forward to fiscal year 2027. Some of the projects that we have planned, all of these projects on this sheet are going to come out of our special funds. So those are going to be our water fund, our VIP, and MFT funds. We'll be completing the water meter replacement project. Lead service line replacement project number 3 is ongoing now. It is being done in concert with the Jackson Boulevard water main and resurfacing project. For the lead service line replacement project number 4, we are working on the IEPA funding for that. So that is in progress. The Jackson Boulevard water main and resurfacing project is in progress right now. We'll be doing another lead service line inventory, but I do want to point out that the $40,000 that we've paid in the past for the lead service line inventory has been grant funded. So we're hoping that we have that again. Green Alley project number 3, which is going to be the 800 block of Hannah Thomas, the T Alley. That we just went to bid and just approved that. So that will take place this summer and fall. We are in design and grant application phase for the Green Alley project number 4. So there'll be some expenses related to that project, but that will not be, construction for that will not be until 2027. Sidewalk replacement project, typically that comes out of VIP. We have about 60,000 budgeted earmarked for that. And then we have the 400, 500 Elgin Harlem water main. This is a project that we anticipate to be about $200,000 coming out of the water fund. And then not on here, we also have the water reservoir detailed design budgeted out of the water fund at around $230,000. And I do want to say, with the exception of the ones that are ongoing, all of these projects will come in front of the council for approval. So these are just the projects that we sat down with Burke, our engineering firm, and discussed what we needed to do.
Quick question. In the Moody's meeting that we had last week, you indicated that you were hoping that the lead service line replacement project would continue to be funded through forgivable loans, but that there was some indication that wouldn't be the case. Could you talk a little bit more about that? And then do we have enough in our special funds to pay for that?
So as far as I am hearing rumblings that it may not be funded. We're going to continue to, keep applying each year. The good news is that Sal and his team have done a great job of getting a jump start on this. And so, unlike some communities who waited, we are many, many years ahead of where we need to be, in order to get this done. I don't really have any more information as far as whether, they are going to fund it or not. That's kind of up to the Illinois IEPA. we have been extremely lucky to get principal forgiveness loans too. So there may come a day where the IEPA says, hey, we'll give you a loan, but it's not going to be principal forgiveness. And so, you know, at that point in time, you know, the council and staff will have to really kind of sit down and determine whether or not we're going to continue with these projects at the pace that we've been going. We certainly have gotten, you know, we have gone from one stage to one stage to one stage. We're getting lead service line replacements done when we also do the water main work. And so, you know, for now, we're going to keep going forward as long as we keep getting the forgivable loans. But that will be a discussion for the future as to whether or not, you know, we're going to prioritize the lead service line replacement projects over some other things, particularly with using funds in the water fund.
One thing we learned in Springfield is that an IEPA is, it has an active proposal in Springfield for the lead service line forgivable loan program. So that's one thing we were able to learn when we went to Springfield and recently. So, you know, wow.
Okay, so the next slide that we have, these are some of the anticipated large expenses. Again, you know, some of these expenses will have to come in front of the council for approval. These are just, you know, as we've been working through our budgets, wanted to pass along some information. I met with our health insurance broker the other day, and you know, typically this meeting happens in like October, and then we get slammed in November to, you know, try to figure out health insurance costs for a open enrollment in December, and, you know, for our insurance to renew in January. So this year I had asked them to meet with us earlier. I learned a lot about how the health insurance, you know, program works. But they were able to let me know that right now they're anticipating about a 20% increase in health insurance. That's not to say that's where we will end up. I will say that for this year, when we did the renewal, the initial renewals came in at about 25%, and we did some negotiating. We changed up our life insurance and dental carriers, and switched all of that to Blue Cross Blue Shield. And so we were able to get some savings on that, in addition to our insurance broker negotiating on our behalf. I've been talking to other municipalities, and as crazy as we thought our health insurance increase was last year, I think we ended up coming in at about 10%. We saw some communities who, like, they were easily over the 20% threshold. I also looked at an insurance consortium. They were coming in, they were able to negotiate kind of a year in advance. So they were last year all at like 4 and 5%, but now they're negotiating for next year already, and they are seeing the same 20% health increase in the insurance premiums. And so we're going to continue working on that, and we're hoping that now that we have this information earlier, we'll be able to work through some of that stuff. West Suburban Consolidated Dispatch Center. So right now we are going through the state is requiring, once again, if you remember, I think it was back in like 2016, 2017, the state forced municipalities under a certain threshold to consolidate. And so that's how we went from having our own dispatch center to joining Westcom. They have set the threshold again. And so there are communities that are needing to consolidate. So what does that mean for Westcom? So Westcom on its own is okay, because we have a population between Oak Park, Forest Park, and River Forest that is fine. We don't need to consolidate any further. However, there are communities around us that do. And so one of the things that Westcom is trying to do is expand. And the reason that they would do that is because one, it would create buying power for us as well. And so by adding other municipalities to Westcom, the idea would be that our prices would go down as far as what we pay in. To do that, though, they also have to make some capital improvements and some infrastructure improvements. And so one of the things that's ongoing right now is we are upgrading the records management system and the CAD system that all of us use at the moment. And so we have two communities that we have letters of intent to join Westcom. So that'll up it from the 3 communities that we have to 5. But there's also additional costs then to the RMS and the CAD. And so what we're anticipating right now for the implementation of this is the village's portion of that would equal approximately 340,000 for this upgrade. That is a cost savings as to what it was prior to these other 2 communities joining us. Other expenses we're looking at, I know the police department is budgeting for 4 vehicles. Initially it was 3, but unfortunately we had a hit and run with one of our vehicles recently, and so we had to add another vehicle to that. You'll see in the budget that's about another 340,000 in police vehicles. So it will likely be less because one of the things that we budgeted for was for the detectives, and the car that they need will likely not be what we budgeted for, because that was a last minute addition. I think the chief, it was maybe 2 weeks ago, if that we added it to the budget. And so we'll do some more research on, that to hopefully lower some costs. Some IT infrastructure upgrades that we're looking at, with the addition of the dispatch CAD system. There's some data transfer that has to go back and forth between our system and their system. We could do it manually, but one of the things they were looking at was how we can automate it. And so that has a potential cost of almost $14,000 for that. There's also so we use Animal Care League for our strays. That agreement went up significantly. I think we were paying $400 a month. In the past, it went up to almost $1,700 a month. And so, right now there's a budget line for $20,000 for animals. And that's for animals that come into the police station that we get calls for, come into the police station as strays, and that we, then house over at Animal Care League. We are looking at, I know there was an addition of about $19,000 for training, and then we are adding evidence records management system to the police department as well, and that carries a price tag of about $16,000. We at the next council meeting, actually, you're going to see authorization seeking approval to spend about $30,000 in fire engine maintenance services. The fire engine that we have, last year, if you remember, we did put a new engine in it, but just like all of our personal vehicles, it does need maintenance. And when you have a $2.5 million piece of equipment, it is not cheap to maintain. And so that will hopefully allow us to keep the vehicle for a number of years. That one is slated to need replacement. I think it was that one was the
We have time on it. We have another 10 years.
Yeah, so we have about 10 years. So I think that, with this maintenance, it's a good investment in being able to keep that engine running, particularly in lieu of the fact that right now we are down a fire truck, which is on order, and will, hopefully be here this fall. But as you'll see below, we are going to be talking about, having to replace one of our other fire vehicles in 2027. Aging buildings. These buildings have been here a long time. We talk a lot about the fire department, police department, village hall, community center. They're going to be, we've already been investing into repairs as far as like the roof and HVAC and heating. We're going to have to continue talking about what we want to do with the buildings. Let's see, IT, this year, talking with IT, we're going to have to look at some major upgrades. We have a server that needs to be replaced. That server alone is $25,000. We also have to have licensing for the server. That's a $30,000 price tag to that. In order to up our cybersecurity operations, our IT company is recommending, it's called Security Operations Center Monitoring. that comes with a price tag of about $14,000. So it's $70,000 just in, you know, additional IT infrastructure. So that's not even including, you know, our normal replacement of computers, our annual maintenance, and then they are also looking at a 5% increase in their contract and their agreement with us. As we all know, we have continued pension liability, and then other things that, you know, are going to be up and coming, if not this year, you know, definitely next year is going to be, like I mentioned, the fire engine replacements, and then putting together for the fire department in particular a vehicle replacement plan. Staffing needs. The village has spent, I would say, decades kind of whenever we were in a pinch, the staff, they got rid of staff. And, you know, I can certainly understand the need at the time, but as Director Olmsted stated earlier, the increased amount of work is now creating workloads for the staff that's here, that is not sustainable. And so we're going to need to talk about, you know, whether it's reorganizing staff, you know, determining who's needed, what's needed, how we can make things more efficient. Our comprehensive plan, it is approaching about 14 years old. And so, you know, last year before we went out for an RFP, and that price tag is going to be around 200, I would say between 200 and 250,000, depending on when we take that on. But it certainly will give us the opportunity to put in place a plan for future years. I've had requests for department organizational and operation assessments. This is something that we're currently pricing out. We have brick sewers in Forest Park. We were actually just talking about one the other day as we were doing the Jackson Boulevard project. These brick sewers are sturdy in that I think the one we were talking about, Sal, it's close to 100 years old. The one that on Jackson. But as we're doing construction, we have to be very careful. So we spent an hour the other day just talking about running a new water main and whether or not we go under it, over it, around it, and all the, you know, the concern is that, you know, anytime we touch that brick sewer are we going to do more damage to it than we want to? And so kind of just putting that back on the radar as something that we need to be aware of, because when we're doing these water mains, if anything goes wrong with those, we're going to be having to replace those and it won't be cheap. Something that we've had on our radar for a while, also is the Harrison Street water main and street repairs. Each year, Sal and Jim and I talk about, you know, what kind of funding we can try to get for it. I think we've qualified for some funding in the past, but not enough to make it something that we've wanted to move forward with. And then this one, ADA web compliance, this actually got moved a year. For municipality of our size, there's a mandate that we make our websites and any documents that are on the website ADA compliant. There's a lot of work that needs to go into that. Anything having to do with like our social media, anything on our website, any documents that we post online. There's a component to this where we would actually have to, for people who could not, so this is an example, if you have a photo up on our website, you have to, one, describe the photo and who's in it. So that if somebody was kind of had the audio going for a site, that they would be able to know what that photo is. And so if they can't see it. So that's one of the things that has to happen. They just recently pushed it back a year. So we were supposed to be compliant by 2027. They pushed it to 2028. And so luckily our administrator for our website has already done this for a couple of municipalities. So I'll be able to forecast kind of how much that's going to cost us, but we're certainly going to need some assistance with that. We're also going to need to do it, make sure that any vendor that we have that is customer facing. So anywhere that you go online to pay a bill or pay a ticket is in compliance with that as well.
So this is a completely unfunded mandate from the state?
Correct.
Another one.
Yes. Let's see, for next one is development opportunities. So just kind of, and Director Glinke, feel free to chime in if you've got anything additional to add for these. We continue to consider a project at 7747 Roosevelt Road that is in a TIF district. And for everybody here, that is the old McGaffers property. So we are still working with a project that is in consideration there. We're also working with a potential client, 1212 Circle Avenue. That is the parking lot that is municipal owned. And so we have somebody who is interested in that piece of property that is also in the TIF. We've gotten information for 949 Harlem Avenue. So that currently sits as a vacant lot. It used to be a mobile gas station at the corner of Harvard and Harlem. And so we've been presented with a project for that. And then 7459 Franklin is the lumber yard. That is, that property is for sale. And so that has development potential as well. Some of the other things that we've been talking about are, village-owned property. Obviously, we still have the Altenheim. And then, we've recently been having some conversations as to if we are going to, assess the properties that the village owns as far as fire, police, village hall, the community center, kind of what the best uses are for the land that we own. And so we'll continue those discussions as we move forward. So some considerations for the council as we move into this year. Again, comprehensive plan update. When do we want to undertake that? Do we want to put together an economic development plan? Utilizing funds in our TIF districts to create a redevelopment plan for Roosevelt Road and for Harlem. Do we want to look at an economic development consultant? We don't have a person on staff. I'll admit that I think Director Glinke and I are doing the best that we can, kind of going along, but I think it would be very helpful to have somebody who actually is well-versed in this area here. And then one thing, we've talked a lot about bringing in new funds, but also budgeting this year for facade grants for existing businesses in the TIF. So we want to make sure that as we're looking at redevelopment opportunities, that we're also considering the businesses that are particularly the ones in our TIF district. So, and then as of the 26th of May, the council should see for approval an agreement with a new village planner, which I'm very excited about, and hoping to take off running when they start, assuming that gets approved. Quickly, just fiscal year 27 concerns. We've got, as we do now, cash flow concerns. Property tax distributions have been delayed by the county still. We continue to have persistent operating deficits. Expenses continue to outpace revenue. We have declining fund balance and reserves in the special funds. We really have been relying on these special funds in ways to help alleviate the strain on the general fund. I would say particularly the police department has felt this impact. They have special funds that have restricted uses, and we have certainly been taxing them to the max in ways that's probably not fair to the police department, but it's allowed us to get by and get them the things that they need without putting us more in a hole in the general fund. Increasing fixed costs, and so that's our payments to our health insurance, our pension funds. Increased borrowing costs, the interest rates that we are, if we were to go for a loan, based on the fact that we don't have reserves, we're going to see some increases in that. Aging infrastructure and equipment needs, and then staffing needs. So, how do we reduce the deficit? And I just want to point out for everybody in the audience again, deficit is not debt. Deficit can include debt, but it's not in and of itself debt. So As Director Olmsted pointed out earlier, a deficit exists when we spend more money than we bring in. And so for things like, even though the water fund is healthy, we have spent more money out of the water fund than we have brought in more money into the water fund. And so I just want to make sure that the last couple of years, that's always been a question. And I know that, you know, if it's when it's not explained or if you don't understand it, a lot of people think, well, I've heard, well, we're, you know, $15 million in debt. No, we're not $15 million in debt. You know, it's, I just want to make sure that everybody understands that. Okay, so I'm certainly not advocating for these. These are areas of discussion. So how do we reduce our expenses? Staffing and services review. You know, we want to look and see, you know, are the services that were provided, are we duplicating services with other organizations that offer them in town? Staffing, are we staffed at levels that are necessary in order to get the work done? Are we staffing services that aren't needed? You know, that's one way that we can take a look and see where we can have a reduction in expenses. Discretionary spending review. You know, is what we're spending money on necessary? You know, and are there areas in which we can cut? The other option is increasing revenue. You know, we can audit existing fees. You know, as we pointed out, some of our fees hadn't been increased in several years. And when I say several years, sometimes it's, you know, it's almost 10 years. And so we don't do a consistent job of making little changes in smaller time increments. We tend to make big changes over big time increments. And so that's something that we may want to think about putting into place, you know, some smaller increases over time so that we're not stuck 5 years from now going, wait a minute, we haven't increased this fee in, you know, 10 years. The CTA transit bill reimbursement. This was something that, you know, we went to Springfield for, and the bill passed. We're still working on the process of which that reimbursement will come back to Forest Park. And so I can't say for certain that we will see a significant amount of this reimbursement in fiscal year 27. I'm certainly hoping for that. But with some changes with the transportation board coming up this summer and the seating of a new NETA board in September, you know, we're going to continue pushing. We are continuing to meet people that we work with at CTA and at the county on this. And I know that our elected officials are continuing to meet with legislatures to make sure that this stays at the forefront. There's been clearly discussion on a places of eating tax implementation. There's been a lot of talk about short-term rental licensing and regulation, home rule consideration, you know, movement on the Altenheim. Something that's come up, kind of caught me off guard, was the use of the Van Buren parking lot opportunities. It is not a parking lot that the village sees a lot of activity on from the CTA standpoint, but we've had a couple ideas come up on how that parking lot might be utilized by other people, and so we're kind of vetting those out with them at the moment. As always, staff will continue to seek out grants, including MWRD, CDBG, IEPA, ILEAS, Cook County, as well as federal funding. And then real quick, I'm just going to talk about our Moody's rating. Commissioner Maxham, Director Olmsted, and I met with Moody's last week. We actually had 2 meetings with them to discuss our Moody's rating. One of the things Director Olmsted and I talked about was whether or not we needed to even go for a Moody's rating. There is a fee involved in getting that Moody's rating. And so we went back and forth as to what we wanted, you know, what we thought the best option for the village was. What we learned is that your Moody's rating is similar to your FICO score. It is a rating that banks use to help determine the village's borrowing power. And it's an indicator of the village's financial reputation and credibility. It was more detrimental if we didn't do it. in order to be able to go out for loans. You know, they look at whether or not you skip those years. And so we did move forward with having them do our credit rating. I am going to be positive and optimistic when I say they affirmed the village's rating. I'm gonna be brutally honest. We don't have the greatest Moody's rating. But we were expecting a downgrade and we didn't. So that was good. The rating that we have is reflective of the village's deficit spending and limited revenue raising flexibility. Our strengths are that we have a low debt burden and that we have a growing tax base that supports solid resident income and property wealth flows. Our challenges are that we have operating challenges driven by pension payments and we have deficit spending. So Moody's recommendation was that we work towards balancing our government operations. We expand our revenue base and a consideration for a home rule referendum.
I would like to speak a little, since the slide is up, and I did, attend the meeting, and I'm gonna, of course, be slightly less optimistic than you are about the rating. I was also glad we weren't downgraded. The first meeting, they kind of set that expectation so we wouldn't be disappointed if we were. But the truth is that we're at a BA1 rating, which they affirmed. So we kept that same rating. And that rating is below investment grade. So I think that's important to point out too. In investment circles, they call that a junk bond rating because there's no belief by Moody's that we would do a real good job making good on, it would be a risky undertaking for us. And so that's going to make it harder for us to borrow. It's going to make us have higher interest rates when we do borrow. And there were a couple other things in the reports, and these are all publicly available online. Anyone can go look at them that I also think are really important. And Administrator Antler's right, like all the things that she said. But there were a couple things that I think are important that were left out when they talked about different other considerations. So yeah, they did talk about home rule. They did talk about our pensions. And they said that although we have made progress on paying the pensions, and that's thanks to Director Olmsted, who works really hard to close that gap. But they still said that we remain below our tread water mark. So we're below Moody's tread water mark in terms of paying our pensions. And I think that's really important for us to acknowledge and say publicly. And then they have these ESG considerations, environmental, social, and governance. So environmental, they said we don't have environmental concerns to worry about. Social, they actually said we're doing really well there. We have a median family income in the 92% of the nation when adjusted for regional price parity, and property wealth is solid. Per capita value at about 110,000. The village's population has been fairly stable as it is mostly built out. But they do call out our governance, which also I think we need to mention publicly. They said governance considerations include the village's history of underfunding pension plans, weak budget management, and lack of plans to right-size operating imbalance in the near term. So I think, it's worth it to say that out loud and on the record, because this is something that a professional organization is saying and that we need to make right on. And in fact, they issue a scorecard. And again, this is online. And I think this is also really important to look at too. And we rated really high in all the different areas that there are to be rated in. So things like economy, institutional framework, like all these things, we got really good scores. And so if we were just based on the scorecard rating alone, we would have had an AA3 rating, which is really high. That's one of the best ratings you could have. But then the Moody's consultants came in and said, okay, but hold on a second. Let's look at the pensions and let's look at how, this town is managing with what it's given. And then they brought us down to kept us at the BA1 rating. So I think that says that there's a lot going for this town. We just have to figure out how to manage it right. So I just wanted to make that point about the Moody's.
So that comes to the end of our information presentation portion of it. Now we can enter into the discussion portion. I'm going to pull up a slide that has just some ideas for discussion. Hopefully we can get through them. Certainly, if there are areas in which that aren't listed, we're gonna be taking notes. And then we can go from there. I'm gonna go ahead and start with the places of eating tax. Since I do have another presentation put up for that, if that's okay. Since I know that there's a lot of people that are here to talk about that as well. So I'm gonna switch gears here. All right, so one of the ways that the village can increase revenue here in the village is through the implementation of a places of eating tax. Illinois Municipal Code authorizes non-home rule municipalities to license, tax, and regulate all places of eating. These would be premises where prepared food is sold at retail for immediate consumption with seating provided. Whether or not the food is consumed on premise. Prepared food includes any solid, liquid, powder item for human consumption. Director Olmsted did a analysis a couple years ago when we started talking about this. And one of the things she looked at was comparable non-home rule communities. So these communities surrounding us all have places of eating taxes in place. So as you can see, our neighbors to the north, River Forest, Riverside, North Riverside, Lyons, Hinsdale, Westmont, Westchester, Brookfield, all non-home rule communities within this area who all have places of eating tax. Just to point out, these numbers for the other communities were current as of October 2023. As you can see, there's variety of in the tax rate for the different communities, whether it is 1%, 2%. The percentage can range from 0.5 to 2% being the max. And then we also show kind of just comparable with the sales taxes in those communities and the motor fuel tax. And then the fiscal year 23 revenue, that's the revenue that they received from the places of eating tax. So Director Olmsted then looked at 71 establishments from calendar year 2025 and calculated the sales tax remittance at a 90%, and estimated what the village could generate if we were to implement a 1% places of eating tax. We could project revenue to be about just over $500,000 to the village. And then at 2%, it could, a places of eating tax at 2% could bring the village an additional $1 million in projected revenue. Just implementation timeline so that you have an idea of where the other municipalities were in implementing their places of eating tax. We've got Hinsdale and Westchester adopting in 2006. Riverside came in 2007. River Forest 2009. North Riverside 2010, and then they did an increase in 2016. Westmont started at 1.5% in 2013 and then raised it about 7 years ago to 2%. Lyons joined in 2014, and then Brookfield most recently in 2019 at 1%. So as you can see, places of eating tax in our area has been implemented for many, many years now. So there are compliance requirements that are set forth by the Illinois Department of Revenue. There's filing requirements, registration requirements. One of the things to note is that there is an owner discount. And so the state realizes that by implementing, if a municipality implements a places of eating tax, there is a burden put on the owners, the restaurant owners, to file. and remit their taxes, on a timely manner. And so they do offer a commission on the amount of the tax that would go back to the business owner to reimburse them for expenses, that would come up for record keeping, billing, and filings that are related to the implementation of a places of eating tax. There are also, as far as penalties and enforcement, these are the varying dollar amounts and percentages that are applied to the different communities. These fines and percentage with the late fees would all be numbers that the council would have to take into consideration when if we were to put places of eating tax in place. Just a couple considerations. Most communities include banquet facilities and catering in their ordinance. The revenue varies. It's just going to depend on how many establishments that you have and what your tax rate is. We'll want to make sure that we set reasonable registration deadlines so that we capture all new owners that come in and are considered places of eating. And then just to put out there, some of the considerations are that the Illinois Department of Revenue also has requirements. And so will be required, businesses will be required to also file with the Illinois Department of Revenue. So with the places of eating tax, there's some next steps that need to take place. One, review comparable community ordinances and revenue data. The council, after discussion, needs to provide direction to staff as to whether or not you want us to move forward with this implementation. You would need to determine the optimal tax rate based on revenue goals for the village. And then once that information is outlined, then staff can start working with legal on drafting the ordinance, and then working towards like the definitions, the deadlines, the enforcement provisions. I know that we've already started engaging local restaurant and food service business owners. And then we would also need to establish an internal process for registration, filing, and collection. It is staff's recommendation, given the staffing needs of the finance department, that we employ and engage company that we use right now, Lauterbach and Amen, to assist us with this. They do this for other municipalities. I think we guesstimated at 10 hours a month approximately. For just focused on places of eating tax. So I will now open it up to the council for discussion.
Can I ask one question first? What is staff's recommendation on the places of eating tax, given our financial situation?
Well, I'm going to say that any opportunities that we can get to increase revenue, we need to seriously consider.
I'm also going to say that it's as much work if you do 0.5%. It's as much work for internal. 0.5%, 1%, 1.5%, 2%. However, what you define as a percentage, it's as much time for internal staff to have everyone registered, to do the follow-up, make sure everyone's in compliance. So that cost won't go down no matter what percentage is implemented. Any other staff?
I think it's important to note that this is not a resident-only tax. I think if we talk to all of our food service providers, they would say the lion's share of their customers are from outside 60130. In fact, I would bet that a fraction of the people who patronize Portillo's are Forest Park residents. Again, it's anecdotal, but they are our highest food service tax provider. You also have the QSRs like the McDonald's, the two Taco Bells, Starbucks. So it's not being inflicted directly on the residents here.
So I'll go first if that's okay. I think everyone knows how I feel about it. But I'm gonna talk about it again. You know, it's hard to listen to these slides with all the new expenses that we have coming up. Some of them, you know, we have no choice about. And it's really hard for me to sit here and look at all the people here, a lot of you whom I've invited personally, and thank you for coming. And that includes, you know, and I know other people invited them too, but that includes the first responders, and it also includes the restaurant owners, you know, and I know that, you know, I'm just glad everybody's here. But it's really hard for me to look at any of our first responders and know that we're having trouble funding your pensions, you know, but we're not doing everything we can to bring in the revenue we need to do that. Last year, you know, or last year we talked about how if nothing that we put in place panned out, some of you guys said you'd be willing to consider places of eating tax, which is why I had asked for some numbers about how did we do from last year. And we don't have those today, unfortunately, but you know, it's kind of looking like we didn't bring in, you know, anywhere near we needed to bring in to start to fix our financial situation. So, you know, in terms of like vetting that I did, because some of you asked, you know, that I do more vetting of this issue. I'm going to talk a little bit about what that looked like for me. And it was different from maybe what you had anticipated, but I'd like to talk about that anyway. The first thing that I did is I did a lot of financial vetting, you know, like I knew we had problems with our pensions. I think we all knew that, right? We all know that. I didn't really understand the depth of those issues. I didn't understand how long they'd been in the making. I didn't understand what it meant. Like, oh, so we don't pay our pensions, you know, we're not making our actuarially determined pensions every year. So what, does that really matter? Well, yeah, it really does matter. I did a super deep dive, and I did it largely on my own. And that's not because Director Olmsted wasn't there to help me. It's because the finance department is stretched so thin that there wasn't anybody really to work with me and help me. So I did a lot of research and I talked to the unions. I talked to some residents who have a lot of information. In fact, I invited one resident who has done a really deep dive into the finances to come to our last meeting to do a presentation. And I asked the mayor and the village administrator if I could have this person come first and sit down with the finance director and everybody and go over some of these numbers. And I didn't even get a response, which was really frustrating for me. Not even a, hey, Maria, that's a bad idea. Hey, Maria, no. You know, I've been trying really hard to get the financial information out there. And I know I'm accused of being browbeating, you know, to the other commissioners, but I firmly believe that a big part of fixing a problem is first identifying it and making sure that everybody understands what it is. And that's what I've been working really, really hard to do for a large part of the last year and longer than that. And then once I understood it really well, I started sharing it. So I've been sharing it at the council meetings, on public record. I've been sharing it on social media. I've been talking to residents about it. So it's out there because I think before we can support any solutions, we need to understand the problem. So that's been a big part of my work too. I did some legal vetting. I made sure we can legally do this, which we all knew that we could. And I'm going to talk about the first responders, and I hope that's okay. And you guys can stop me if it's inappropriate, but I'm going to. I've spent a lot of time talking to mostly the firefighters about their needs, not specifically about the pensions, but about their needs. I see that they gave us all a report today that talks about, you know, some of the things that they've been concerned about. But I will tell you that I've sat in meetings with them, informal meetings, where I feel like they're almost begging me and saying, please, you know, we need more resources. We need more staffing. We need more. And I have said to them, well, you know what? I'm really sorry. We don't have the money for that. And I got pushback and they said, not having the money is no longer a good excuse when it comes to public safety. And I thought about that for a long time. And I think that that's true. I think we can't keep using the excuse, you know, because when firefighters are telling me we are tired physically, we're tired mentally, we are worried about the safety of this community, then I have to take that very, very seriously. And that's what I'm doing. So I don't know if anyone's here tonight at public comment to support this specifically, but I'm glad you're here at least to learn about the budget meeting. And I hope it's okay that I'm going to read something that I did get from the police union, if that's okay for me to read it. So I reached out to them as well, inviting them to come and talking about this specifically. But just overall, please come out. And I got this from Sergeant Brendan Riley. He sent it to me today and I shared it with the rest of the council. And he said, Commissioner Maxim, over the past few weeks, I have spoken with our union members, had conversations with our union board, as well as our negotiation team regarding the upcoming budget meeting. It was decided that the police union wanted to stay away from directly involving ourselves in political matters or speaking during the meeting in an open setting. That being said, when it comes to opportunities for the village to increase revenue, we support those efforts. It is no secret that it has been a struggle to fund the police and fire pensions. It is also clear to union members that facilities need improvement, retention is difficult, and wages need to stay competitive to ensure staffing levels improve. All of the above listed items require money, and right now that means new streams of revenue may need to be explored. The Forest Park Police Department has greatly evolved in recent years, and it is a great place to work. But even with improved resources, technology, and strong administrative support, we face new challenges. Potential hires, new hires, and long-tenured officers have access to information like never before, as well as the ability to seek employment in a more financially stable and updated policing environment. Access to information regarding the village's budget and pension concerns has led to these new challenges for our department, and we believe exploring new sources of revenue would be a step in the right direction. Our union is open and willing to have this message shared with all the commissioners, the mayor, and whomever else has a hand in making decisions to help our village move forward financially. Thank you for your time, Sergeant Brendan Riley of the Forest Park Police Department Patrol Division. So I'm going to leave it at that. I'll probably have more comments later, but I don't think we can ignore the one biggest source of revenue that's available to us right now. I think we should focus on things in the future, but this is all we've got right now. Thank you.
So I'd like to say something. All of the commissioners, I think, understand that the village has very real financial challenges. The administrator has done a great job of illustrating those this afternoon. So is Director Olmsted. Before I get into the meat of my comments, the administrator mentioned that we might see a pause in the forgivable nature of our IEPA loans. That's because, just to be very candid, municipalities are fighting for the same dollars in a lot of cases. So municipalities in the Proviso, Oak Park River Forest area, we share the same legislators, and the departments and the towns see what each town is getting. So Forest Park managed to get a pretty good concession in the transit. We're going to talk about that. But that did not go unnoticed in Springfield. Administrator talked a lot about some of the costs associated with IT upgrades. Cyber is going to be huge over the next 10 years. If you watch the network news, as part of this conflict that the United States is engaged in, there was a big hack towards a system called Canvas. Canvas is a system that's used at a lot of universities, colleges, high schools for grade maintenance. Foreign entities have hacked into Canvas. It's been disruptive at campuses all across the country. And I've been to conferences over the last year or so where they warn that these same foreign entities, mainly the Chinese, to some extent Iranians, others are going to start going after municipalities. And they're going to find the weaknesses in these municipalities. They're going to actually go at some of the vendors that access our systems because they want to have a way to disrupt things on a very large scale in the United States, right? Imagine a situation where a foreign actor could, press some buttons and have, your water mains damaged or have, water storage facilities malfunctioning, chemicals that aren't supposed to be in there, all of a sudden, pouring into your water supplies. So those are the things that foreign actors are trying to do because they can't match the United States in a symmetrical conflict, person to person, plane to plane. They're trying to find other ways to destabilize our systems so we can count on having to repeatedly upgrade our security systems. That's unfortunate, but that's part of municipal governance. So the places of eating tax, I think it could be a great source of revenue for the village. Earlier, someone mentioned that we have, Portillo's and we have Chipotle and we have McDonald's. Those are businesses that could pay the places of eating tax. These are corporate entities located in Forest Park. But we have a number of much smaller restaurants. And they don't have the same financial resources and the same supports. And so what I spent the weekend doing was reaching out to some of the restaurant owners directly to ask them about what do you know about the proposed places of eating tax? How will it impact you? What are some of the unintended consequences that the council may not be aware of? We don't want to see restaurants closing along Madison or along Harlem. Some of the smaller, the Cactus Grills of the world, the Thai place over on Harlem. I can't get it out right.
White Crane.
Chirion, right? Madison Park Kitchen. So some of the small business owners, they say they could deal with it, right? Some said, well, if you're going to do it 1%, don't do it 2%, because our costs are going up. One business owner said that if you combine his insurance increases along with a new tax rate, 2% for him, that equals about $36,000 a year. He might as well hire a new manager for one of his restaurants. So that's going to be a real hardship. Some just weren't aware. But of course, we do have some restaurants that are doing really well and they can handle it. But I think before we implement something like this, as elected officials, we need to know how it's going to impact the restaurant owners, particularly the small business owners. Now, there's a question of whether the tax would be paid by out-of-towners or by locals. A lot of us in this room probably eat at Forest Park restaurants. Quite a few business owners said they would just pass it on to customers. I had one person said that he is raising a lot of his items by 50 cents, right? Because not only is he looking at this tax, but some workers want to go work in Chicago because they have a higher minimum wage than what's in Forest Park. And so restaurant owners are competing for staff in the Chicagoland region, as opposed to only having to have staff in Forest Park. So we should certainly continue to vet this places of eating tax. I appreciate the work that staff put into it. The Moody's ratings letter has been discussed. Moody's expressly talks about how they see home rule as a way to really right the ship. We didn't get in this hole over the last few years itself. This hole has been digging, I'd say, for a couple of decades now. Staff have worked to address it, and we are working to address it. But this is a long-term thing that the village is looking in the face now. So what opportunities do we have other than the places of eating tax? The administrator mentioned the CTA bill. If you're not aware, I've talked about this quite a bit, but the short of it is that for the last few years, we have been advocating to officials in Springfield to do something about Forest Park's burden from having to respond to the Blue Line terminal, 7-Eleven displays, as well as the Green Line terminal, but more to the Blue Line terminal, particularly as it impacts the fire department. About 20% of the calls go to 7-Eleven displays, roughly. In May of 2025, a bunch of us went to Springfield. But on one particular day, the chief and I spoke to probably 15 legislators in an afternoon about the challenges facing Forest Park. And that was in anticipation that the state was going to reform transit and possibly consolidate the transit agencies into a single board. So last October 2025, October 2025, they did consolidate the transit agencies under a new entity called NITA, Northern Illinois Transit Authority. There was a provision in that bill that will require the CTA to reimburse 4 municipalities, Forest Park, Oak Park, River Forest, and Rosemont, for our first responder costs associated with CTA sites within our municipalities. Okay. So that was passed in October as part of the Senate Bill 2111, the transit consolidation. When we went to Springfield a few weeks ago, we talked to President Harmon. He said nothing's going to alter that provision. So right now, we're figuring out how to implement the state's promise to our first responders. So the chiefs of the 4 communities I mentioned earlier, Oak Park, Forest Park, River Forest, and Rosemont, are talking. They're working on a billing policy that will be directed towards CTA. It's estimated that ambulance costs will be about 3,000, I think.
3,000 per transport.
For transport. So we won't necessarily recoup a full 3,000 per transport. But, a rough estimate is that to the fire department alone, the reimbursement could be north of $650,000. That's a conservative estimate. And it's not taken into account what it means to police. Separately, the police are looking at their own models. Do we expect some pushback from CTA? Absolutely, because it's new. But that's why we go to Springfield, to work with our legislators. And we're trying to find revenue that's not paid by the people who live in Forest Park. We're trying to find revenue that's not even collected by the businesses in Forest Park. We're trying to find state revenue to reimburse Forest Park for what we're putting out for like the larger Chicagoland area in terms of securing that train site and the adjacent train sites, whether it's Oak Park or the Green Line station or what have you. And so what I'm trying to say is, before we implement a places of eating tax, and before we decide if we're going to do 2%, a full 2%, which restaurants are saying, please don't do that. We want to have a reasonable estimate of what we can be bringing into the village from this CTA billing, okay? Now, the way it works, NITA doesn't go into existence until June 1st, like a couple weeks from now. But the way the bill was written is that in January, we will submit to the state our costs associated with the CTA sites within our municipality. Okay. The expectation is that over the next couple of months, we'll have a better sense of what those costs will be. There's a group working on it separately, like police are working on their side, buyers working on their side. So we can move forward with the places of eating tax, but we don't have to solely rely on the places of eating tax, right? If we can get away with a 1% because we have enough coming from potentially, CTA billing, as well as the opportunity to tax short-term rentals. Short-term rentals has been a new discussion item too. And we're trying to figure out, what kind of regulations will work for Forest Park. We had some very, well-meaning residents who came to the village and they want us to just ban short-term rentals within 500 feet of schools. Okay. We're looking at whether or not that's legal. Okay. Because in some cases, you make a mistake, a municipality can be guilty of what's called a taking. So if someone has a business that's operating, and we just implement a regulation that shuts them out, that's considered a taking because we're taking away their livelihood, we're taking their business, and that's not allowed. We can regulate the use of Airbnb, but we can't regulate simply the existence of Airbnbs. So we have to be really careful in how we approach that. So those are some of the things that we're looking at. The potential sale of the Altenheim property. We know for years now that people have been interested in buying some of the land. Some people want to buy all of the land. Some people, it's very valuable land. People want to develop it, right? The administrator mentioned that we have a new planner hired. This planner, unlike our prior planner, is not a solo practitioner. This planner is part of a firm. They're a larger firm with a different set of capabilities than I think we saw in our prior planner. They have lots of economic development experience. They have experience developing what's called SSAs, special service areas. That's something that the village was considered in 2019. COVID wrecked that. But the SSA, the special service area, could be a way to see funds raised to really beautify Madison Street and enhance our business district. And so we have a few opportunities in front of us. And so, yes, we can absolutely talk about the places being taxed, and staff has done a great job. But as elected officials, we need to familiarize ourselves with what is this really going to look like, if we implement it. Are we going to put out of business, Harvest 360, which is in the mall, or Busy Bee, which is the old Blue Max Cafe. Some of the restaurants aren't doing as well as the others. So I just think we should be measured in our approach to this. And then in terms of first responders, we understand your concerns about your pensions, and you've heard the presentations. The village has been contributing more towards your pensions. And something I think I've said to the first responders privately is that when we start, recouping some of the CTA reimbursement, we want to see that go towards pensions or first responder apparatus, so that the people in the police department and fire department have the tools that they need to be successful. So we have a lot of challenges in front of us, but we also have some opportunities in front of us. And so, looking at home rule, that's not something that's going to be right around the corner, but it's something that can be very meaningful to the village. If we were to get home rule, we could implement a real estate transfer tax. Berwyn, I'm told, has they make a lot of money off of the transfer tax. Again, it's something that's not paid for by people who live here. It's, paid for by people who are either selling or buying. But it's a way for us to generate significant revenue. And so, this year has been a real challenge. 2026 isn't starting off great. But there's a war, and there's a lot of uncertainty. Business owners don't know what they're facing over the next few months. Someone might lose a staff tomorrow and have to hire someone new. And so let's just be measured about how we impose taxes on the small businesses. And I'll just leave it there.
I just want to make one quick comment on places of eating, because I don't think we touched base on this. It is intended to be a pass-through tax. It's not something that's intended for the business owner to absorb. I went to a grocery store in another community and listed separately on my receipt, you know, my net sales, my food and beverage tax, my tax at 10%, the sales tax, and my grocery tax at, 2.25. So it is a pass-through. It's not intended for something. I understand the work, of course, that we will require for the business owners to do. I'm sure, no one has a spare hour a day to do anything extra. So that, 100% understand. So that adding to their cost. But I do just want to reiterate that it's not intended for them to absorb this tax.
Yeah, I think that's one of my main questions. I know we've talked about this for several budget sessions over the years. It would have been great to have implemented it 4 years ago when we talked about it, and folks might not have even noticed at the time because we were in a better, everyone was in a little bit better economic situation. But I know when Commissioner Maxim asked me to meet last year and said, how do we get this over the finish line? I had highlighted a couple of things that I feel like the village should do because of the challenges everyone is facing now, like razor thin margins, people are going out less. It's just a very scary time to hear tax or money going up or spending more if I go out. And I really think some education is required at this point, and I'm curious to know in that last year what the businesses have been provided to explain this to them or who you've talked to. Because I don't think everybody realizes that it is a pass through. I think they just see it as taking more off the top. And again, like Director Olmsted said, it's still time, and time is valuable. But not only is it a pass through, but the village can allow, Administrator Entler called it a commission, but basically 1% of what you pay to the village, you keep to sort of offset those administrative costs. So businesses are keeping a portion of this. It is a pass through that residents, but also non-residents pay when they go out to eat. I was looking at some of my receipts because I went out this week. And it would have been an extra $1.25 at Mexican Republic for me, and it was another, I don't even think it was $1 at another place that I went. So it seems relatively approachable when you kind of look at it that way, but I feel like all of that is our responsibility at this point as a village to really educate folks and let them know what this looks like, and to sit down with our businesses and talk to them. We all fully understand the financial challenges that the village is facing, and we want everyone to have, their health care and really good, livable, fair wages and fully funded pensions. I mean, nobody doesn't want that. I think that's the right amount of double negatives there. But so let's figure out how to do this, and let's figure out how to do this in a way that our community is on board, and we're implementing it in a way that maybe it is, 1%. And then we're looking to increase it if it's going well, but we need to have those conversations, and those conversations haven't happened, and I don't know why. But to me, it sounds like we're all open to this. We just have to figure out how to do it the right way. So those are just my notes on places for eating.
Can I add something to the conversation? I have a very close working relationship, and I'm very loyal to our places of eating providers. And the vibe I'm getting is that there is room for negotiation. And I think one of the issues that was raised most consistently was getting back to 2 hours. for the late night players that were taken during a relatively turbulent period on Madison Street. That will give them an opportunity to gain back some of that money that might be affected by a 2% tax or a 1.5% tax. But I think that's an opportunity that's on the table. I think the group is willing to negotiate. I've had the impression, and I've heard from no one that said it will put me out of business. And I don't know that anybody has more day-to-day contact with our food service and general business community than the people in the Department of Public Health and Safety. I think if we go into this as a partnership and we look at trying to offset, any potential losses by giving them greater hours of operation. I've heard people say, look, all we want is Friday and Saturday night, not every night. Okay. That's how we negotiate. That's how we partner. And that's how we get this thing over the line. It's low hanging fruit.
We need to do the work.
And I think, I want to add, in terms of the education component, I think doing it before is good. It's one way to do it. I think doing it after is also a way to do it, after implementation. I think to expect that we would get real buy-in from businesses who will be affected by it is naive. I don't think, even with the right amount of education, we would get people to say, yes, yes, please put this tax on our businesses, right? And so I think it's part of us as our jobs as elected officials to make these hard choices and to say, okay, you know what? We're in a situation, you talk, Mayor, about home rule. Home rule doesn't magically give us money. It allows us to, guess what, implement more taxes to make more money. And the only way that villages like ours make money at all is mostly through taxes, right? It's property taxes, sale taxes, a little bit of income tax, and sometimes grants that come our way, but it's all about the taxes. That's where we get our money, and that's what we have to decide here. And then after, we decide to implement it, and I'm not saying we can't reach out ahead of time too. I'm super willing to sit down if Tish and Rachel and you, if you want to be involved, have time to sit down before our next budget meeting and put together, some more information for the businesses. That's what we can do. But I also think sometimes we need to make the really hard choices that are going to hurt, right? If we were home rule, maybe we would raise property taxes. People aren't going to like the transfer tax idea. That's why towns never want to approve home rules, because the realtors come in and they say, we don't want this, right? We sitting up here, we have to make the hard choices. And Mayor, to your point about let's wait and see what we get from the government, I'm not saying that this places of eating tax is going to fix our problems. I'm saying it's one part of lots of pieces that need to come together right now for us to put a dent in what we're looking at in terms of the pensions. I'm saying we have to do all the things. We can't just pick one or two. We have to do them all. And, we heard it from Moody's, we're hearing it just by looking at our own numbers. We're hearing it from our finance director, like we need more revenue. And I don't think it, from my opinion, I'm just one person up here. I'm saying we need to do all the things all at once.
I didn't say anyone said, please let me pay taxes. What I said is some restaurants can handle it. And I asked them, like, what's your situation? And they're reluctant. One person, sent an email and saying that Forest Park is going to be a desirable place to start a business. Now, maybe that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but I think it's better to understand how a new tax is going to implement or impact small business owners than to just, implement it at maybe a 2% rate.
So what would get you on board with it?
I didn't say I'm not on board. I said that we need to talk to these restaurant owners and help them to understand what they're looking at. And we need to understand how it might impact them, because I don't want to see unintended consequences.
I would agree. I mean,
you tend to kind of flip flop your position depending on what you're arguing. I know when we were trying to pass the single-use plastics ordinance, which had no fees, no taxes, it's just saving businesses money and folks had to ask for a plastic utensil. I know that I worked with Moses to send letters to businesses. I visited them personally. We had stuff online. We had a survey for folks to fill out. Like, I did a lot of outreach, and I know that you didn't want to pass it because you didn't think it had enough community buy-in. You took issue with the amount of outreach that I had done on that.
That wasn't, I didn't think
You
we had any,
needed more community buy-in. So I just,
my thing with that,
first
we
or
didn't
back
have.
end, I think to get it across the finish line, I think we should do the work.
With that, I said, we don't have the teeth to enforce it, and I took issue with passing an ordinance that we had no way to enforce.
But
I
I
so,
think we should just do the outreach. A lot more.
yeah, it sounds like a good idea if you got together, put together a white paper, got it out to the businesses, but I mean,
Or just go
One.
talk to them, right? Don't give them a white paper, just. go
well, I
talk.
mean, so everyone's spitting the same language, right? You want to make sure that the message is clear, you cover the points you're supposed to cover, so having at least something in your hands, so we're consistent with the messaging, but I mean, we've been doing this for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe budget meetings, maybe 4, where we've actually talked about places of eating. And forgive me, again, I'm saying it's a good idea, but like, it's a pass-through tax. It's whether it's $1 or $2 on $100. So here's your bullet points. It's a pass-through tax. The residents and the people that go and visit those places pay an extra 1% or 2% based on their bill. $1 on 100, maybe 2 on 100. That's what you'd be paying. There's administrative costs that are tied to the business owners that they would have to incur. That it looks like there's a 1% back on the commission. That's something new that I didn't know coming to this meeting. So that was something that is new and interesting. So that was, which is a benefit to help soften the blow to these businesses. But it seems to me, and again, I'm not a business owner, but I do frequent many of the establishments in Forest Park, and I think if I saw the numbers 2%, 1%, I think 1% is a reasonable approach. And if we find that the village is able to manage it and we're able to keep up with that, and you know, that gives you room for growth if you wanted to jack it up here. It's not something that we're breaking ground on. I mean, our surrounding neighboring communities have been doing this for 20 years. Some of them for 20 years. We're just behind, you know. There was a comment made, we should have been doing it a long time ago. I agree. I 100% agree with that. If done the right way, we should have been doing this. There was a time that this was brought up. I don't think it was possible based upon existing legislation back when Tim was involved, because I know it came up in discussion. I could be wrong on that, but we never did chase it. Either way, it was on the table last year in a public meeting. We talked about the same thing. We just spent 45 minutes talking about today. There's your outreach. I mean, but again, I think going out and talking to the business is good, but you know, and Lori, perhaps you could help send that message or help with us. I mean, I think having an opportunity to be able to share, I think, Steve, you bring up a good point as much. And I was on board with that point and still am, but that only affects a certain amount of the businesses. But again, it's a pass-through tax that is minimally evasive in terms of financial impact on people that come to town. And we've spent the first hour and a half talking about how much we need with money. This one seems easy for me, easy. So again, I know we're not deciding anything. We have another meeting that will come together again. And so by design, it gives us an opportunity to solicit some information, go door to door, and go meet face to face. Rory, that's always my favorite way to communicate, as a matter of fact. So I think that's a great idea. I would be surprised if we had, or surprised if we had folks that really didn't know the ins and outs, because it's been on the table for a couple of years, but it certainly doesn't mean that we shouldn't do that. Anyway. That's agenda item 1.
what I'm hearing is that,
We
I can take this, I can put it into an info fact sheet. 'Cause essentially this is the information that Derek Jones put together for the council. And put it into a sheet that would help keep the messages in the citizens. And then, work with the council to do more outreach. We're likely going to hear from some business owners today during public comment as well. And then we can come back with that feedback at whether it's the next budget meeting, a future meeting dedicated solely to, discussion on revenues perhaps. Just want to make sure I'm understanding.
Yes, sounds good to me.
Okay.
Rachel. I think it's important in the context of a discussion in the revenue sphere, to note that something that we had high hopes for has, I'll be kind and say underperformed, and that is the cannabis tax. The market has become saturated. You're seeing bigger companies buy out smaller companies. We've had a dispensary on Madison Street that closed in less than a year. I don't know how close they are to backfilling that space, but essentially it's worthless. I've reached out to the owner of the building and said that the neighbors are very interested in purchasing the building and they have the capital to make improvements to enhance their business. It would be a much better play for Madison Street. I signed off on the cannabis dispensary in Roosevelt and Harlem before Christmas, and it's still not open. I don't expect that to do much better because right.
No,
There's a sign that says it's open.
I know people
It
that
is.
just bought something in there.
Yeah,
so-
it's open.
Is it? Okay, well, I stand corrected. We'll see what the revenues are from that location. I mean, Tish, we've had conversations where the return on the tax has been slow. But we were certainly expecting that to be a higher producer of revenue, and frankly, it's showing no sign of having anything other than limited promise, given the changes in the industry.
So I've got marching orders on that. Couple other things, short-term rental regulation. I know that's been something that we've had a lot of discussions about. Director Olmsted and I met with our attorneys today to get some of the questions answered. So I just kind of want to make sure that, in our discussions about short-term rental regulations, there's been some question as to whether or not short-term rentals are defined under the hotel definition for the hotel tax. It was amended in the municipal code that the term hotel does include short-term rentals. But I do want to point out that the biggest challenge with the municipal hotel tax is that it is a restricted use tax. And so any money that comes in from a short-term rental through the municipal hotel tax cannot go into the general fund. It needs to be directed for use through tourism. It's very specific. I certainly think it is something that, we could take a closer look at to determine ways to be able to use that when we do participate in the Visit Oak Park and Beyond Tourism Bureau. We have our Chamber of Commerce. I know that you can use it towards marketing and branding efforts in an effort to get people to stay overnight.
Does that include the license?
That is separate from a license fee. So the village could institute a licensing or permit fee, registration fee. Some of the things that we want to consider when we do that, though, are what are the costs to regulate? Do we have the staff in place to do enforcement, to monitor when new short-term rentals come into the community so that we're making sure that they are registering with us? These are all just questions that we have not really dove into yet to determine if that would, if doing so creates a benefit to being able to do this. So there is potential in short-term rental funds coming in, but everything that we're seeing is that it's not going to be a revenue generator in the sense of like being able to allocate money to put towards pensions or even the general fund. It is monies that will have to go very specifically to you know, functions that are directly related to tourism. And you know, on the surface, I still say it's something that we should consider looking into. But I don't know enough about, there's still a lot of research that needs to be done as far as how we would actually put that into a procedure at the village hall level.
I would be curious if it could, if, like, spending it on economic development, would fit within that?
Yeah, the code was very kind of brief in it, and so we would certainly need to dive into that marketing, branding, that kind of stuff. One of the things that we saw was that you can spend money on festivals, but one of the things we talked about this morning was it can't just be like, okay, we want to host a local festival. It needs to be something that brings out of town guests into Forest Park to keep them here overnight for hopefully multiple nights, and then they're spending more money in our community. And so I think it's something that, you know, is worth researching, but I want to be just clear with everybody that this is not going to be a means to an ends to, you know, bailing us out in our general fund.
Or promoting, I mean, if it would promote our businesses.
It has to, yeah. I mean, I'd have to look into that. It's a lot of, so much of it with the hotel tax is about getting people to stay overnight in Forest Park.
One of
They
our,
choose to stay here if we have great local restaurants and
Mhm.
stuff. That's right.
Yeah.
I'm curious how that, yeah.
we've had this conversation many times. Our absolute Achilles heel in terms of local promotions has been the engagement of a qualified social media consultant and upping our game on the internet here. It's some towns have just spectacular, you know, contributions to YouTube, TikTok, and those things are directly benefit our economic position in terms of attracting new businesses, attracting residents to the neighborhoods. But I think that would be an excellent exercise in those funds.
I would be curious as well when we're looking into, like licensing. If we can do like a tier system, if you are, like an Airbnb owner on site.
We did talk about that a little bit this morning.
Yes.
We talked, and what I took away from our conversation is that, one, there's certainly probably more research, but on the surface level, kind of, we have to be careful that it doesn't open us up to litigation in the sense that, like, we don't do that for apartment building owners. We don't charge separate fees for people who are, you know, landlords that don't live in the buildings. And so that was one of the concerns that came up with legal this morning, was that, you know,
Because historically, we do have evidence of more demand on our first responders in non-owner occupied rentals, short-term rentals.
actually, I think we just ran those numbers, and, or no, we ran the numbers for the schools, right?
Property, and it was not insignificant.
No, compared to. You didn't run it on every Airbnb in town.
No, not that.
No, I was saying comparatively, I would be curious to
To
see
know
how those
what-
numbers, if that would make your case to do a tier.
Gotcha, I understand what you're saying.
Hey, Rachel, I'm just doing an expectation adjustment here. So it is 6 o'clock. Is our plan to go through all of these items?
No, not necessarily. Those were just some of the ideas that were brought up.
Okay.
That I wanted to put out there. So if there's anything particular that, you know, you want to address, you know, we also want to make sure that we have good time for public comment.
Right.
Like how many?
I mean, if we don't, if there's some of these items, will there be an opportunity at the in that next budget meeting to pick up kind of where we left off? Is that
Yeah.
what you're thinking? Oh, okay, okay.
4 public comments and then 2 write-ins.
Can we go over one more issue, or are we done with our portion? I just want to talk about one thing real quick. And before I do that, Jessica, you might be right. I can't remember the reasons I objected, so I don't want to stay on what was or wasn't, so you could be right about that. So I'll, whatever. I just want to clear that up that I had objections back then, but I can't remember for sure what they were. I want to talk a little bit about the Altenheim because that is a big one-time boost of revenue that would come into the village. And depending on what we do with it, could provide us with, a pretty big new property tax base that would bring in regular income. So I kind of want to talk about where we are with that now. I know that at last August, we had kind of fought to get a meeting in place and we had a public meeting. And then there were these deliverables that were promised and those never materialized. And I'm wondering if we can get an update on that and then what's going to happen next. Because I asked for updates and never got any, but that is something that I think should be part of our short-term and then also long-term planning.
We reached out to the Altenheim, made them clear of our challenges this week and the need to monetize that in a reasonable way does not impact their right to private insurance. And essentially, a couple of board members, not necessarily speaking on behalf of the whole board, but I think they're somewhat knowledgeable about what the whole board needs. Said that if the village wants to work with a developer to build something of similar character to residents of the grove in terms of density, in terms of number of units, in terms of height. Then go into intelligence, but they just said of character of residents of the grove, then they would not object. So with the village having identified a new planner, the firm that the village will likely engage is given maps of the Altenheim. And wants to put together a game plan for how to approach moving this forward.
Because last time we had the meeting, we talked about we would get a draft RFP that we could all review, whether that was a good idea or not. That we would begin the process of withdrawing from the Invest and Cook IGA for the bike path. We would research the utility burial project and present details and next steps. Initiate the process on the buffer area sale with the senior living facility who wants to buy back a portion of the land. So those are the 4 things promised at the end of that meeting.
We also lost a village clerk right after that, which I spent an enormous amount of time helping Director Olmsted run the village clerk's office in Vanessa's absence. And so some of that did take place slowly, but you are correct. Not all of those manifested. And so
I mean, the bike there, that's
Yeah,
done.
that's
If we want to apply for that again, we can.
Okay.
But if we do, I would highly recommend we explore the west side of the property, especially considering we don't know what kind of development is happening there.
Yeah.
Burying the lines, I think, is also a dead thing that isn't worth pursuing at this time. And then as far as the buyback, we're waiting on, hearing updates on that. And I do think you received a draft RFP, not specific to Forest Park, but an example of one. I think having us start thinking about potential uses so that we can, as a council, can have a conversation. I tried to start that at the last meeting, but nobody really wanted to kind of throw out ideas. And I feel like we're all very sort of stunted in this, we've got to put grub condos. And that might be, the best uses. We haven't done a market feasibility or a site plan there. But I think we need to have a little bit more in-depth conversation about what it is that we would like to see there. We've heard from the community, and I think we need to package all that together and then present that for some feedback, and then, maybe an RFP or draft RFP.
The planner thought maybe it makes sense to do an RFQ, request for qualifications.
We still need to have discussions about what it is we see there, though. I think we could back ourselves into a corner if we're we're saying come back with something and we get one proposal that's maybe not great. I think it would be better for us to have a little bit more solid idea of what we think would be best in that space.
Yeah, and this is not on you. Like, I'm not saying, you know, like, Jessica, how come you, like, I just, you know, these were things that, you know, staff said that they would get to us, right? And so
And reduces the risk of a branch taking out an entire grid. We can do it for no cost. I think we should stay in. I receive regular emails asking about the status. The last one I said, you know, Rachel, should we 86 this and be realistic? And Rachel wants to hang in there, and I agree with that. It's just that we haven't seen the movement that we at the staff level had expected on this. And, you know, there's outstanding issues like the buyback issues that are still fairly nebulous at this point.
To public comment?
Mr. Zeller, public comment?
yes.
Okay, so the first public commenter is Joseph Sullivan. Step it to the mic. Everybody has 3-minute time limit.
Yep. Hi, I'm Joe Sullivan. I own Duffy's Tavern since September of 2019. As usual, I have prepared comments that I've already thrown away. I just want to respond to some of the things I heard today. I had written, Ryan, you're doing this because it's easy. I'm talking about the places of eating tax. You're doing this because it's easy. Now, I actually wrote that before you said we should do this because it's easy. You know, I think this is going to go through. I think you guys are going to do this. I hope you involve us in some kind of partnership discussion about this. I think there is a quid pro quo aspect to this that we do need, or we would like to see something in return. I don't know what that would be, but I will, and that's a tangible thing. I would like to talk about some of the intangibles that I'm not hearing you guys talk about. I'm not hearing you guys talk about the long-term economic future of the village. I'm not hearing you guys talk about the fact that I haven't walked down the street in a while, but I did last year for the business meeting and counted the number, not of vacancies, but of businesses that do not produce sales tax revenue. And that nobody seems to have any plan at all on what to do about that. All right. If people don't know this, professional services do not generate sales tax. Okay. So your gyms and your beauty salons and your dentists and your plastic surgeons and all the things that exist on Madison Street now that weren't there when I moved here in 2007 are now here. Okay. And that's one of the reasons it's easy to look at bars and restaurants, is because we're already here. Okay. And you guys, I'm going to say it, have no idea how to get more people in town. Okay. Other than the dentist and the plastic surgeon. Okay. This is a huge, huge, huge problem going forward. Okay. So home rule, don't get me started on home rule. Somebody said home rule is probably never going to come to this town. And yes, thank you. So what I'm not hearing is any kind of reasonable talk or plans for talk about long-term viability of the businesses in town. Thank you.
Next up is Travis Myers.
Hi, everyone. Travis Myers, Local 2753, Firefighter Union President. Mayor, council members, my members and I helped knock on doors to get you elected because I believed in your vision for Forest Park, and I still do. And I'm here tonight because I need your help to deliver on that vision in a way that matches what's happening on the ground right now. Nobody in this room intended to create a burnout crisis. Nobody intended for our firefighters to work unsustainable shifts or to watch good people leave for other departments. But here's the thing about intent. It doesn't answer a 3 a.m. call. The impact of decisions made over 20 years is real, and it's happening right now. In 2011, we responded to 2,953 calls. Last year, 4,742. Our staffing model hasn't changed since 2004. We're running 60% more calls with the same firefighters. In fact, almost no other department in the state of Illinois runs this call volume with our staffing level. Statewide, a department handling 4,700 calls would operate a second station with nearly double the operational staff. We're doing it with one station and one crew. Last month, 70 mutual aid calls came from Oak Park, River Forest, Berwyn, Cicero, North Riverside. They're covering our gaps because we don't have the capacity. That means their residents wait longer. But here's what keeps me up at night. It's 3 a.m. A paramedic's been on shift since 7:45 yesterday morning. He's been awake for nearly 20 hours. His ability to perform is compromised. Then a structure fire comes in and we're asking exhausted firefighters to save the lives when they haven't had adequate rest. Your constituents deserve better. They deserve to know that when their worst day comes, we're at our best, not running on empty. I'm also the pension board president. On-duty injuries from exhaustion, stress aren't just safety issues, they're a financial crisis. Every disability claim for fatigue hits our pension fund. That's a cost the village will carry for decades. We can prevent that now, or we can pay for it later when it's much more expensive. This council is capable of bold action. I'm asking you to move fast. Property sales, developer partnerships, revenue solutions that matter now, not years from now. We need our firefighters at their best on our citizens' worst day. I didn't help you get elected to work against the village. Completely opposite. I did it because I believe in Forest Park, and what we can build together hasn't changed. We're at a moment where the village needs to step up alongside with the fire department. We all have a role here. I'm asking you to meet this moment with the same commitment my members show up with every shift. Let's work together to make sure public safety in Forest Park is something our residents can count on. You've got my partnership. I'm asking for yours right now. Thank you.
Next is Brad Wall.
How we doing? I'm Brad Wall with the Junction Diner. In no way do I mean this to be, I support everything you guys do, and my goal is long-term to see that those funds are for you guys. So we appreciate that. But to be clear, I definitely oppose the 2% tax. We empathize with the financial hole the village is in, but fear proposals like this will continue to worsen the problem. The argument that other surrounding towns are doing it, it's really not a sound argument, especially considering most of those cited towns have additional revenue streams for the businesses afforded to them. We found ourselves in a village that is less pro-business than surrounding villages. And quite honestly, this gives them another bargaining chip when soliciting businesses like ours. Okay. In the 13 years we've seen revenue opportunities taken away from eating establishments through reduced hours, paid parking, gaming, live entertainment, restrictions, to name a few. We understand that this is a pass-through tax. Okay. But I and many others would be embarrassed to just pass it on, therefore pay it out. Ultimately devaluing our business, making it a sunk business cost, and leading to more empty restaurants. Okay. Which if I walk out my door, there's plenty of them. Hopefully they're going to fill pretty soon, but that's where we're at right now. The real concern is the cost on future business development as well as existing establishments. As other neighboring towns are regularly soliciting businesses like ours with incentives, Forest Park is doing and considering the opposite. The real problem for me is within the math. Since this tax simply fills a void versus generating additional taxable revenue, with all things being equal, total loss in taxable revenue must be assumed. Okay. You follow me on that? Okay. This tax does nothing to generate additional revenue, whether it be marketing, something to your 10% that you make off of us, right? 2%. Current. You've already passed it. I can tell. Okay. But you've already taken that. Yeah. Okay. But anyways, with that calculation, a 16% decline in current revenue, is all it'd take to have a zero net benefit, whether it's from current business decreased sales, lost businesses, or lost business opportunities. Okay. Failure to understand this is part of the short-sighted thought process that got us into this current situation we're in. We cast a wide net for our customers, and many people come from a significant distance for our experience. While I greatly care about this town and intend to be here for a long time, I question if I would make the same location decision today, given what neighboring towns currently offer. I urge you to look at decisions as either being pro or anti-business friendly and focus on growing taxable revenue rather than increasing tax rates on current revenue or on current businesses, which can have the opposite net effect. Back to Steve's point, and it sounded to me like if 0.5% is going to cost X amount, might as well do 2%. Okay, can I get third? Huh?
Engage people after.
I'm sorry.
This is 3 minutes.
Okay. It sounded to me like lost my train of thought. But if we're going to do 0.5%, the plan is we're already going to do 2%. If that's the case, let's at least earmark some of that money to helping some of the businesses generate more revenue. Okay, that's it.
Next is Marty Talalian. Did I pronounce that right?
Talalian.
I was close.
Hi, I'm Marty Talalian, 7335 Jackson Boulevard. I saw the Moody's recommendations. They gave the 3 recommendations, and some of them I think probably subject to interpretation. At least, when I hear working towards balancing government operations, it means something to me. Maybe it doesn't mean same thing to everybody. I look at that as, how you allocate your resources, essential services, things like that. They also talked about expanding revenue base, I'm also for that one. That would be selling portion of the Altenheim, changing our zoning to allow greater degree of development, bringing in more money for our tax base. But as that expression goes, you had me, then you lost me. The last one was home rule. And, I think the village made a right decision 25 years ago when they voted home rule down. I don't know how you all feel. I did hear people talk about the transfer tax. Then the real estate agents don't like it. It's not so much the real estate agents don't like it. It's actually just taking a portion of our property is really all it is. My family moved into this town when I was a baby. So a long time ago, over 70 years ago, bought a 2-flat. And then I'm not sure what percentage of the rent went to property taxes back then, because obviously I was a kid, but we bought more property. And at the time when we bought property taxes were about 12 to 15% of the gross rent. Now it's a third. It's a third. You have a 2-flat in Forest Park, a regular little 2-flat, brick 2-flat, 1 bathroom, 2 bedrooms, about almost $500 a month. Over $10,000 a year goes to rent. Or goes to property taxes. A third of your rent is going to property taxes. You're paying $1,500 for a 2-bedroom. When I moved back to town after college, I moved next to the library. My rent was $300 a month, $320. So I guess my point is that, politicians talk about affordability, but the tax rate, the tax burden is already enough. You got to get more efficient spending, and cut back on the discretionary spending, essential services like our fire department. Thanks.
Anthony Crawford.
Hello, I'm Anthony Crawford. I'm the general manager of O'Sullivan's Public House. I've also been a resident since 1989. All right, so I think the biggest thing that I hear here where I can offer anything is perspective. I've been managing O'Sullivan's since 2019. I've worked there since 2007. I've also worked as a lifeguard in the Park District for 9 seasons. I'm pretty invested. What I'm hearing is the desired result that we want, right? The theory of PFE, right? Places for eating tax, PFE. In formula, the science of it sounds good, but the actual results, the reality of it is what we need to consider. So to offer perspective, anytime we've increased our prices, which we normally eat out of control costs and expenses, anytime we make any increase, we see a decrease in items sold. And, O'Sullivan's has been lucky enough to say we've been able to maintain revenue growth, but we've been plateauing hard over the past year, probably 2. And a lot of people see O'Sullivan's on the street as one of the more successful small businesses. Small businesses have it so hard right now. Any new additional cost or expense is a challenge. For instance, Doc Ryan's and Shanahan's, well-established businesses, are gone without this tax. And I understand it's a pass-through, but it's the challenges, right? They incurred loss of hours, loss of opportunity of business, because Doc Ryan's, for instance, Their bread and butter was late night entertainment. The rug was ripped out from underneath them, and now we have an empty space on Madison Street. So, what we got to think about is, can every business successfully pass this through? Can a cash-based establishment like Goldie Burgers, right? Goldie's is cash only. How do you pass along 1% or 2% on a $4 beer? Of course, if they keep a tab going, it could, $20, you could collect 25 cents. They can just increase their prices a little bit, right? But a few other things we got to think about is, people see Forest Park as like the economical choice locally. As much as we could talk about the other municipalities, we have to look to our neighbors, and in that, Oak Park. Does Oak Park have this PFE tax? Does Berwyn have this PFE tax? Because I think one of the unintended consequences or results that will happen is this will factor into our customers' decision making. Are we going to go to Forest Park, where in relative terms, they incur currently a 10% sales tax? You add on a 2% PFE tax, that's a 20% increase on taxes alone. So on a final bill, it's only 1 or 2%, but on taxes alone, it's 20% on that 2%. Would you clutch your wallet a little bit if your property taxes went up 20%? I think so. Is that my 3 minutes?
Then we have 2 write-ins. One is from Martin Soris. To put another 2% tax on us when our industry is so depressed is a bad move. Most of DuPage is 7.5 to 8%. Our restaurant in McCook is 12%. We constantly get complaints. We absolutely lose businesses to our competitors. Our place in Lyle is 7 or 7.5%. It really makes a difference. Between the sales tax increase and the now pay for parking, Forest Park is becoming less of a desirable destination to launch a business. We know for a fact that we bought our restaurant in McCook, where they have a 12% sales tax, tens of thousands of dollars cheaper because of the 12% tax. On a restaurant doing $150,000 per month, the tax is like a $36,000 a year extra payment. Compared to an 8% sales tax village, that number would be $72,000. It is a powerful disincentive for a new investment. Also understand, in the current economic environment, this 2% cannot be easily passed along. I believe if you ran a business like ours, you would be more sympathetic to our plight. And then the last one is from Donnie Biggins. If a places for eating tax must be imposed on restaurants and bars in Forest Park, I ask that the tax rates start at 1%, not 2%, and to be revisited year after year. Cost of goods for restaurants continue to be on the rise, and with the price of gasoline continuing to go up, so does the price for every vendor delivering goods to the restaurants. Another cost that continues to increase is our yearly liquor and general liability insurance. For me personally, my insurance is roughly $30,000 a year and continues to increase year after year. Combining insurance and new tax rates on small business owners is equivalent to paying a salary for a manager on staff. It will continue to make operating in the black a difficult task for all to achieve. Forest Park has always been supportive to small business owners, which is why I chose to bring my business to this community. I understand the need to find new sources of revenue for the village, and will do everything I can to help increase tourism and patrons visiting not only my business, but the other businesses in the community. I encourage everyone to come out and support the annual Pride Festival at Constitution Court on Friday, June 5th. Yes.
All right, commissioners, staff, that concludes our public comment section. Thank everyone for lively discussion. We'll have a follow-up, probably a couple of follow-ups. I'm going to suggest that we target July 8th for a meeting where we can more in-depth discuss the places of eating tax. its merits. And how it can be implemented in a way that works for the village. We can discuss other revenue sources as well, other revenue opportunities. By then, maybe the planner will have some information about how the process will work. Maybe we've got a couple of other ideas that were discussed tonight, including potential CTA reimbursement. Having said that,
Can I ask a quick question? Will that give us enough time, Director Olmsted, to get the appropriations passed? Okay.
probation's what I'm saying.
Yeah, right.
Essentially, I guess.
Yeah, so this is just like a
Workshop.
meeting, a workshop meeting. Right, not, yeah, so no, we won't have the appropriations passed those.
No, I meant, if we have it on July 8th, will that give you enough time to integrate anything that we could potentially come up
Treating
with?
this as a budget meeting?
I just really want to hear more about
Yeah.
particular places. We can have another meeting. July since
You can have it as
6
well.
weeks.
Right.
I just want to make sure you have enough time to.
No, that's fine.
You make it
Okay.
work?
I'll do my best.
Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Yes, sir. Nero, make that motion.
Move. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, second, we adjourn.
Thank you.
We're not on the roll.